Hi NCC, happy Saturday. It's another rainy day, so thought I would just take a minute and hop on and share with you some more from the women's devotion. Well, it's not just for women. The women's ministry of NCC has been going through this book, What If Jesus Was Serious? And it applies to all of us, though. It's been really hard hitting. There's been a lot of it that has, we've had to just pump the brakes and sit there and ponder for a moment. What does that mean to us as Christ followers? How do we live that out? And this week, one of the passages we were looking at is in Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus tells us 4 times, do not be anxious. And, fear can be a huge element in everyone's lives, anxiety. But there were some things that Jesus focused on specifically. He said, therefore, I tell you, before the therefore, he said, you cannot serve God and money. So this has to do with, a lot of it has to do with fear of having enough, of scarcity. So we're going to look at that for a minute. Jesus says, therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life. And then later on he says, which of you by being anxious can add a single hour to your life? And then later on he says, don't be anxious saying, what will we eat? What will we wear? What will we drink? And then he closes that section by saying, don't be anxious about tomorrow, because each day has enough trouble for its own. Anxiety comes in many forms, and it can affect us in many different ways. But this particular passage in the book, the author is focusing on what does it mean, abundance versus scarcity. If Jesus was serious, then we will always have enough. We will always have enough. What does enough mean to me? What does it mean to have enough? Enough for what? I think we each have different definitions of that based on what we hope for in a lifestyle or a standard of living. I think depending on what part of the world we live in, enough can mean very different things, huh? So what does enough mean to you? The children of Israel were given enough food for each day. And he said in Exodus chapter 16, he said the amount that he gave them for a daily provision was intended to be a test to see if whether they would follow his instructions and trust him that the amount that he gave them every day would be enough. Each morning, it says in Exodus 16, each morning, each one gathered as much, which was 3 pounds or so, as they would need for the day. In verse 21, some people tried to gather extra so they could hoard it and save it up for later midnight snacks, I guess, huh? And it would rot. He told them, I will give you enough. And I know how we can tend to cling to our money. We can cling to our possessions. We can cling to our savings and be concerned that we have to hold on to it, our resources, our space, because if we are generous with it, there may not be enough left for us, and so that can lead us into a scarcity mentality, which is never the posture or the mentality intended for the children of God. As a matter of fact, later on in this particular section, he says, if Jesus was serious, we'll not be enslaved by fear. If Jesus was serious, then we can give ourselves away for the sake of others without fear. When people are afraid, they tend to enclose and hunker down and hope that the food and water will last. And it reminded me of the Y2K that we lived through. You remember that? Where people were buying up tons of freeze-dried food and building bunkers and storage places and thinking that was the end. We better grab it while we can. And I wondered at the time, like, so if this really is the end and, you know, everything shuts down and you're the one person with food and you're a Christ follower, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to shoot the people who come to your door asking you to share? Are you going to be generous? What do you do as a Christ follower who has resources when other people do not? I'm serious. This has caused us to really pause and think a lot about what are our resources for? What is the abundance we've been blessed with for? And I read in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28. This is describing how we're supposed to live as children of light. He said, "Do not give the devil a foothold. He who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with his hands, so that he may have something to share with those who are in need." The whole point of work and generating income and savings is so that we can have something to share with other people in need. Wow. That's the point of going to work? Is that why we go to work? Is that why I go to work? There's when we're afraid, we'll pull our resources inward, he says, into a posture of protection and self-preservation. We only think about ourselves, our needs, our survival. From this defensive position, we cannot love because we cannot give. I think that we've got to look at what is the purpose of the blessing and the resources that God has blessed us with so much. We live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And I'll go ahead and say it. I think we're so afraid that people are going to come and take that away from us. Where do we think we got it in the first place? It was God who provided enough. Has God changed? Will he continue to provide enough? How much is enough for you? A lot to think about. So, as we are going forward into this great unknown, pray with me that we will be faithful with the resources God's blessed us with, and that we'll not let fear keep us from really following him and remembering why he has blessed us with abundance. It's not so we can hoard it. Y'all have a great Saturday.